Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Holy Donuts podcast. This is kind of a special episode. This is different. I'm joined by repeat guest, first time repeat guest. That's a big deal, Dave. First time repeat guest, Dave Raley.
Whoa.
The first time.
Okay.
No one has had a second appearance yet. Let's hope it goes well. If it goes well for you, we may invite a few people back. So no pressure, but you're the first one to come on for a second time. So you're welcome, I guess. I don't know.
Trendsetter, I guess. I'll take it. I actually really appreciate that. That's like, I didn't know that. That's an honor.
Yeah, man. Well, we're pumped to have you. You're one of my favorite people in the nonprofit world. One, for your love of Disney, for your just like generosity of spirit, but then also because you're legitimately one of the more cutting edge thinkers in the space for nonprofits. And like, let's just not bury the lead. You've got a new book coming out in just a few weeks, which 2 years in the making. Name of the book, The Rise of Sustainable Giving: How the Subscription Economy is Transforming Recurring Giving and What Nonprofits Can Do About It. How does it feel to almost have the book releasing?
Okay, so somebody asked me this the other day, and I thought, I think the best analogy, because I write a lot, by the way.
Yeah,
I mean, you know that, you read
always,
it. I write a weekly column called the Wave Report.
Right.
It's just so fun to me. A little bit painful, but so fun. But the best way I can think about it is I feel like I'm at the very end of a marathon.
Yeah.
It's like the equivalent of, a 5K to a marathon. And I used to be a runner in my younger days. And I ran one marathon, Matt. And I remember the first part of the marathon was like, this is awesome. I'm running a marathon. Yay. The middle part of the marathon was like, this is terrible. Why did I choose to do this? I'm never gonna do this again.
Yeah.
But then that last stretch, and for different people, it might be the last mile, it might be the last 100 yards. You're just like, oh my gosh, this is so incredible. And so I'm at that point where it just feels like, I'm over the proverbial hump.
Yeah.
It's coming out. I am so pumped, getting feedback from people. I had somebody that called me the other day and said, I'm loving the book, and then started quoting
That's amazing.
like parts of the book back to me. I was like,
I said
is that happen? So excited, man.
Very cool. Well, congrats. It's huge. I know it's something you've been working on for a while. And so pumped to see it out in the wild, and pumped for our audience to get to hear a little bit more about the book before it comes out. It is all about sustainable giving, all about really recurring giving and subscription economy, all things that, we hear about all the time. And you're kind of one of the big ones beating the drum on a regular basis. In fact, that's what you talked about last time you were on the show, was we talked about recurring giving. So the first place that I kind of wanted to start with this was like, okay, we talked recurring giving last time. If you haven't heard that episode, go back and listen to it. Go take a minute, listen to that. That was a good primer on things. But what I want to know from all the research you've been doing and having your head in the books and writing and thinking, getting kind of your thoughts out there, what's been the most surprising thing that you've learned in the process of writing this new book?
Oh, the big question. Well, there was a lot. I would say it's kind of a two-sided coin. The first side is how deep the rabbit hole goes. I think, and I've been a quote unquote fundraiser, marketer, whatever you want to call. I've been in the nonprofit, charitable, philanthropic space, Matt, for 20 years. And I've basically, the very first program I ever worked on was a recurring giving program. And so it's so easy to be like, yeah, I know this. I get it, But the further I went into it, the more I realized, number one, how it's changed, which is why I wrote a book, and the subscription economy and consumer trends and the way people expect and think about what a recurring, giving relationship looks like has changed. And so it's just so easy to just assume like, well, I know recurring giving. And so I think that the first side of the coin was just simply how deep that rabbit hole is and how it really is changing. And then the second side, which may seem contradictory, but I really think it's two sides of one coin, which is candidly how simple it is. It's not easy. This is definitely one of those. Like, this is like, if you do pick up the book, you're gonna see there's a lot of dimensions here. But it's really relatively simple. It's just different from traditional one-time, what I would call one-time or single gift fundraising. And oftentimes it's treated not that way. It's treated as, oh yeah, it's just like a one-time gift. You just happen to give that every month,
Right.
and
Right.
so
Right. It's
it
different.
is different, but it is a pretty straightforward process.
That's awesome. Okay, so that's exciting to hear both sides of that, right? That's changed. So let's start with the first one, which is it's changed, right? Like your first program was
It's
recurring
changed.
giving. It's I my background's a lot in church. We have a recurring fundraiser every single week. It's called Sunday morning service, and it's kind of a big deal. We have a biblical mandate to do it, so it's like I always joke. I'm like, listen, you don't have to be a good fundraiser if you work for a church because like God's told people to give on a recurring basis. You have a built-in recurring donor plan. So that's my experience. But like, how's it changed? Like, what's the
Yeah.
subscription economy done? And I know you could probably we'd spend 2 hours talking about how it's changed. Why don't we just kind of dial in and say, how do you think specifically the rise of the subscription economy in the way we consume our goods and services, how has that changed recurring
Yeah.
giving programs for nonprofits?
Well, first of all, and you hit it nail on the head that recurring giving is not new. I mean, I actually have a chapter early in the book. It's a brief chapter, but it's a quote brief history of recurring giving. So I cover about 8,000 years of recurring giving history
Cool.
in about 15 pages or something like that. But the point being is recurring giving is not new. I mean, anybody listening to this podcast knows that. But if you go back to the ancient roots of recurring giving, go back to the ancient Israeli people
Yeah.
and the idea of what you would see in the Old Testament of the idea of the tithe and the first fruits, and that is the earliest example in recorded history of recurring giving. There's other sort of philanthropy prior to that,
Yeah.
but recurring, the idea of a regular ongoing commitment that
Yeah.
is on some schedule
Yeah.
and happens was the ancient Israeli people.
That's so cool.
Fast forward, the first, by the way, the first recurring giving program in the United States.
Yeah.
People think, oh, I've heard it's about 100 years old. It's actually almost back to our nation's founding in
Okay.
1812. It
Okay.
was the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Mission, aka the first missions agency,
So,
Christian nonprofit missions agency in the United States. May of 1812, basically got a letter from an orphanage in India, and they proposed this idea of, get this, they literally called it um, subscriptions, a
what?
subscription for supporting
Amazing.
supporting orphans in this orphanage. And they were like, that seems like a great idea. And I thought, well, yeah, it's a couple hundred
It's a
years
pretty good
later, it is
idea.
a great idea.
Yeah.
But okay,
Yeah.
so let's fast forward another couple hundred
Yeah.
years to now, right?
Yeah.
It's really the last 5 years that I would say that recurring giving has started to completely transform, and it's been driven by the subscription economy, right? The subscription economy we all know exists. Where it's a part of our day to day lives today. And that really started to grow rapidly about a decade ago. And it's taken a few years. But what has happened? So to your question about just the changes that have been driven by the subscription economy, what has happened is first consumer mindsets were changed around comfort level with recurring giving. So that's the first thing is like if you would have asked me 10 years ago, Dave, what are the nonprofits or charities that you give to on a recurring basis, air quotes, I would have, the only two would have been World Vision and
Yeah.
Compassion.
Yeah.
And for those of you listening, you probably can guess why, because
Sponsorships.
I have two children,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah. That's
sponsored a
it.
child with
Yep.
World Vision when my first child was born, and we sponsored a
Yeah.
child with Compassion when my second child was born, and we wanted that as a part of our, parenting and teaching them
Yeah.
about being a good world citizen and philanthropy and their responsibility. Um, but fast forward to today, I give
Yeah.
to my church on an automated basis. I give to um, many more nonprofits that are just simply the nonprofits that are most important to us.
Yeah.
So first thing, comfort level, just simply, it was a
Yeah.
foreign idea to give on a recurring
Right.
basis to most nonprofits,
Yeah.
5 or 10 years ago. It's
And now it's
not
just
that
one.
anymore. It's any nonprofit,
Yeah.
and so that's the first thing. The second is, and I want to be careful here, but it is the expectations that donors have about what that experience looks like.
Okay.
They expect it to be easy. They expect to receive some sort of ongoing value.
Yep.
And by ongoing value, and this is where I want to be careful, I'm not saying this is like your Netflix subscription where if it's like, I'm not watching Netflix anymore, I'm going to cancel. Like it's not,
Right.
we need to send widgets or, tchotchkes to our donors. Although, by the way, some ministries,
Sometimes.
some nonprofits actually do have great resources and
Oh yeah.
books and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not knocking that. That's actually beautiful. But there is this expectation of ongoing value that I'm going to receive. And it's often intangible, but like, why am I giving not just now, but why am I giving next month and
Yeah.
the month after and the month after? And people are much more ready and willing to cancel subscriptions today. And they're much more, I think, more sensitive to what that ongoing value looks like. So those are a couple of the areas we talk about in the book.
Absolutely. Okay, that's really, really helpful to kind of hear. How's it changed recently? How have kind of mindsets changed around that? What's some of the data that you kind of discovered in doing this research on how nonprofits are actually implementing recurring donor programs right now?
Yeah. Well, and that's what I think we're seeing. And I love, by the way, I appreciated your compliment earlier about just helping. One of the things I feel called to is help people to see sort of what the waves are that are coming. Hence the reason I write a weekly column called the Wave
I
Report.
love it. Yeah.
But so for example, when I first started about the subscription economy, I had to explain what that meant. I was
Yeah.
like, Netflix? And they were like, oh yeah, I know Netflix. And then I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's happening everywhere,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
subscription
Absolutely.
boxes and
Yeah.
grocery shopping
Yeah.
and car ownership and all that
Totally.
stuff. Today, I make that joke, and everybody, like, actually half the audience rolls their eyes because they're like too many subscriptions,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Totally over.
But to your point about what has been happening with recurring giving, again, 5 years ago, I was saying, guys, this is a big
Yeah.
deal. And I was seeing organizations really that were taking advantage of this succeed. People didn't see it for themselves.
Yeah.
Today, when you look at the actual metrics, and I'll just give you a couple. Neon One is an organization that works with a lot of different
Yep.
charities. They did a study recently. They published 2,100 different nonprofits, very, very small nonprofits to large nonprofits. They found the average charity from 2019 to 2024 grew their recurring giving revenue grew 127%.
Huge.
So I'm not here saying like, hey guys, this is a future trend we should pay attention to. This
It's
is
like
this is the
now.
reason for the book is like,
Yeah.
no, this is a now trend. Let's take
Yeah.
advantage of this.
Totally.
This is the opportunity that we have. So that's one thing. If you look on the subscription side, it's over. I think it's 95.8% of U.S. adults have at least one subscription. The
Yeah.
average number of subscriptions, by the way, this is always a
I
fun
want to
one.
know.
You want to guess?
I'm going
The
to feel
average.
really, really fast because I know how many I have.
Yeah.
7.
7. That's where I probably would have guessed. The average American has 12 subscriptions.
Okay.
In fact, there was a recent study. They actually asked people, how much do you spend on a monthly basis on subscriptions? The average American was underestimated how much they spent, Matt, on subscriptions by $133.
Wow.
They were
Okay.
spending $133 more
Yeah.
every month than they were even aware of.
Yeah.
That's $1,600 a year for the average American that they're spending that they're not aware of.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a lot.
in their entire software applications
Yeah.
now that you can have. One's called Rocket Money, where
Yep.
I have it, and it sends me an email
Great.
every month and says, "Hey, here are your subscriptions. Are you
Yeah.
sure you still want these?" And
Yeah.
then they
Well,
actually make
cancel
it
it for you.
easy to cancel.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
by the way, and this terrifies nonprofit leaders when I speak to them, their charitable gifts are showing up in those reports too.
Yep.
And so they're lumped in there with the Disney Plus and the Amazon Prime and the whatever, Microsoft Office 365. And so I won't say there's a complete convergence between paid subscriptions and charitable giving, because there are some differences,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of things that we can learn from what's been happening in the subscription space
Yeah.
to grow recurring giving.
Okay, so let's just go, Vivian. You teed it up. You threw yourself the softball question, man. You're doing my job for me. What are some of the things that nonprofits can do, and specifically, obviously, our audience is mostly Christian ministries, to start seeing a rise in recurring giving if they haven't put it in place already as a significant strategy for their ministry?
Yeah, I would say there's plenty of things, but I would just, to boil it down, for the context of our conversation, I would just say three things.
Yeah.
keep it simple. First of all, benchmark your existing program. Like you can't know where you're going until you understand where you are today, right? And so um, there's no guilt here, but most nonprofit leaders, when I talk to them and I say, how much, how many recurring donors do you have right now, and how much do they give on a monthly and then annual basis? So in the subscription world, they call it monthly recurring revenue, or MRR,
Yep.
or in the or ARR, annual recurring revenue, which is a very like live and die metric in the subscription world. We need
Yep.
that, by the way, in the
Yeah.
nonprofit world. What's
I
my
love
MRR as a nonprofit? You should
it.
know that.
Yeah.
Now, again, no guilt, because most nonprofit leaders don't know that. But
Yeah.
what's my what? How many? How much? So that's your benchmark. So take stock of what you have.
Yeah.
I've got some posts on our website, and there's some leave behind materials in addition to in the book of metrics and how to calculate those and all that stuff.
I love
But
it.
let's just keep it simple for now.
Yeah.
So number one, benchmark. The second thing is to evaluate. So assess your current program.
Yeah.
This one's a little more straightforward.
Yeah.
There's two things that you should do. Number one, um, uh, uh, evaluate your donor journey.
Yeah.
Um,
Well played.
if you've been in fundraising for any period of time, and I remember when I worked with a lot of the different nonprofits I've worked in, you have this sort of like sinking feeling that like we designed this experience, we created these processes and these these treatments, quote unquote, that nonprofit donors should be receiving. But push come to shove, I'm not sure whether that's all actually happening when it comes down to it.
And
And
if it
so
is it even working?
yeah. So, like,
Yeah.
for example, every client that I work with, every nonprofit that I work with, we do a secret donor study.
Yeah.
It's like
That's great.
not novel. There's others that do it.
Yep.
I will say it's helpful to have an outsider do it, because I
Yep.
don't have any of the excuses that you or your
Yep.
staff might
Yep.
have
Totally. Yep.
um, for
100%.
why it's that bad,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
why what processing,
Yeah.
gift processing, blah blah blah,
Yeah.
requires social security numbers on the donation page, and you're like,
Yeah.
but
That is the way the
really,
system does it.
like, did
Yeah.
you use social security number as your customer ID? Because that's not, I tease, but
Please tell me it's not a real story.
no, that is not a
Okay.
real story. I could tell you some zingers of
Off
stories
air. Off air.
that are
Yeah.
just as bad. But
Yeah.
the bottom line is, you need to understand your current journey.
Yeah.
And this is specific to recurring giving. Again, not lumping the current journey into how you treat a one-time donor. That is important too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Totally.
how do you treat both one-time donors to recruit them into recurring? But how are you treating your recurring donors?
Absolutely.
So that's part of evaluate. And then the other that I just can't get away from is actually talk to donors. And you can. There's a lot of potential methodologies there. Again, that can be a helpful thing to have an outsider do, just because there's some objectivity. But so many people say, well, we have donors comment on our social media posts, so therefore we have a quote unquote dialogue. And it's like, that's
Not
not a
really.
dialogue. Those are comments
Yeah.
on social
Yeah.
media.
Yeah. Totally.
I'm saying literally schedule interviews, talk to donors. There's some methodology to that we talk about in the book, but it's that combination of understanding what is our current experience, what should it be, like what are the high moments, and how do we improve those. We talk about that in the book. But then also, let me actually talk to donors, both
Donors. Yeah.
ones that have signed up for recurring as well as ones that haven't, and
Say why.
you know try to understand some insights.
It's great. I
So
love it.
that's the second one. So we've got benchmark, how many, how much, evaluate, and that's a combination of donor journey and talking to donors. And then the last piece I would say is to design. And I have not, let me think about this. I have not met a nonprofit yet in the last several years that does not have a quote recurring giving program. Everybody has. So this is not assuming, well, you don't have one, so therefore you should create one. Everyone has the ability to take recurring giving. Most organizations, it is literally a checkbox on the website or on a response device in direct mail. I would argue that's not a recurring giving program. But the bottom line is you take recurring gifts, you have people who donate. Some organizations will have a landing page, or like often organizations will even have a name. It's the, partner, friends of the ministry, program or whatever. But again, it's not really a program. And so what I would recommend is you think about, what does it look like to really create something that is a compelling ongoing value proposition that has a clear brand. And I'm not saying you need to have like a completely separate brand from your parent brand. We go into naming your program in the
Yeah.
book, by the way. But you need to think about this not just as a checkbox on a website or a gift type in a database. This is a really, truly, and should be a program, a fundraising program, just like you might have a major gifts fundraising program, just like you might have a single gift sort of mass fundraising program. Your sustainer program should have the same standing and candidly over time the same resourcing,
Yeah.
staffing,
Level planning,
software, all
organizationally.
those things.
Yep.
And as organizations have been doing that, by the way, Matt,
Yeah.
I mean, Charity Water is an easy one to pick on because
Yeah.
they saw the wave like 9
Yep.
years ago, 10 years ago.
He got on early. Yeah.
And by the way, I remember they were often kind of derided and like ridiculed, maybe too strong a term, but like, wow, look at them leaving all those dollars on the table and they could be doing single gift acquisition. And it's like, well, now they have 70 plus thousand donors giving every month. I think it's 20 some $1 million a year is the last stat that I heard. It's like, well, turns out when you treat it like a full-fledged program, that could maybe work.
Yeah. I love it. Okay. So those are the three elements of it. Quick little thing there, because you're already talking my kind of love language of technology and technology terminology. For feedback from donors, like it still baffles me. Anytime we build a sustainer or like recurring donor program for a client, it's just like a non-negotiable that we're going to do at minimum a quarterly net promoter score that go. And yet again, that's not talking to your donors, but like in tech world where we're constantly measuring MRR and ARR and also churn rate, which we'll get to on retention rate. Like the other thing we're constantly doing is sending out net promoter scores, right? To say like a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend our tool, our product, or service to a friend? It's the quickest way to understand how they actually feel about your brand. It cuts through all the noise, all the other stuff to say, no, really, how likely are you to recommend this to a friend? And question 2, why did you select that number? Anything below an 8 means you're failing miserably. 8 or up and you're doing great. 10 is what you're aiming for every single time. And you just collect that data. And it's 2 questions, takes 30 seconds for a donor to get. Collect on your donors. We do it for at least the recurring donors on a quarterly basis. Doing it from all your donors on a quarterly basis would be really helpful. It's a yes and amen. Talk to your donors. Please, dear God, talk to your donors. But also get some quantitative data that you can track on as a KPI across the years to understand, hey, here's really where how our donors feel brand sentiment wise about how we're doing. Because it helps understand, hey, how they feel about that relationship.
That's fascinating. I'm very familiar with Net Promoter Score, certainly from a sort of a brand or B2B, perspective, but I've not heard of it being used in the recurring donor piece. We'll have to offline about, doing some correlation analysis between, because it's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, then the question is, what are the correlations between somebody who's a quote net promoter? Like, does that mean they just retain more or give more, or do they tell other people? I mean, the point of net promoter is, the idea is that they will tell other people about,
Absolutely.
But I don't know. So I'm fascinated.
Yeah.
See, this is the problem with writing a book, Matt, is like, you're like, I'll never know all the things that need to be known to write this book.
Keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
Well, hey there, Holy Donuts listeners. Ever feel like your nonprofit's donor experience is like a jelly-filled donut with no jelly? Well, don't fret. We found the jelly to your donut dilemma. Enter WeGive, the software tool that's like the cream filling to your eclair, or should I say the glaze to your donut. With WeGive, you're not just taking a donation, you're rolling out a red carpet for every person who gives to your organization. And with WeGive, you get an incredible donor portal, events, pledges, surveys, segmentation, on and on we could go on the features. And those checkouts, though, smoother than my attempt to make homemade donuts, which let's just say didn't quite rise to the occasion. See what I did there? With WeGive's innovative engagement tools, your donors won't just feel the love, they'll be coming back for a second. Because nothing says thanks for your dough better than a world-class experience. So if you want to sprinkle some extra special magic on your donor relationships, check out WeGive.com. Okay, so let's get. I think a lot of folks hear this and say yes. I think most people are stuck in exactly the space you described, which is we've got a recurring gift button, which means technically we have a recurring donor program, but we don't actually. And maybe we've got a basic little journey built out. We've got 5 emails or something like that, welcoming them. Maybe we're doing some sort of a free offer to them, some sort of thing. And then literally had this call with a client yesterday. We're rebuilding their sustainer program. Well, what is it like? What does communication cycle look like? What does it mean? You said, it's all about adding value to them on a regular basis. What does that look like practically to do? Is that just are we just going to be sending them an email every single week? Is that a gift? Is it swag? Like, could you kind of help us think through what are some of the best practices around actually building a true value add communication plan for engaging with recurring donors in that program?
Yeah, and you're saying with existing recurring donors.
Yeah, with existing or as you're saying, hey, we need to really make a push here. We got to have a funnel to drop them to, right? Like we got to have a plan of like this journey that they're going to go into, at least for the first few months, right? So we're not every month like, what do we want to do this month?
Yeah. I wrote an article a couple, well, it'll be a little ways back, but I can give you the link. It's called "Why Your Sustainer Program Is Not Working," which
Okay,
is so it
I love
sort
it.
of hits that on the
Yeah,
hits that on the
yeah,
head, and it's 9 different. We won't go through all of them, but
yeah.
9 different reasons why I see. It's not all of the reasons, but some
Right.
of the most
Nine
common
pills.
reasons why I see that. And one of those reasons that came to
Yeah.
mind as you talked about it is you're focused on, and I'll explain the language in a moment, but you're focused on um, acquisition when you should be focusing on conversion, or
Mhm.
vice versa.
Yeah.
So there's a couple ways to grow a recurring giving program. Number one would be acquisition, right? Common term in nonprofit, nomenclature. But that basically means you're getting new donors their first gift as a recurring gift, and they're like right out of the gate. They are a recurring donor, which is amazing. And some organizations, by the way, have the kinds of offers, forgive me, and programs that actually they should be focusing on acquisition. And I outline what those are in the article as well as in the book. But and this is I don't have statistical information on this, but my experience is it seems like a majority of the time you should be focusing on conversion of your existing one-time donors. So acquisition is one side of the coin. We get donors from the first gift as recurring. Conversion is the second side of the coin, which is how do we take existing donors and quote convert them to recurring. That's where most of the fruit is for most organizations. And again, there are very notable, massive examples on the acquisition side, World Vision and Compassion included, by the way. Um, and so there's just some things you've got to discern about, like, is our program offer what we are bringing to the world and how we engage with donors, is it conducive to getting somebody who's literally never given before to have their very first gift be recurring? And again, the answer some of the time is yes. Often it's an organization with a highly visible need, very clear solution.
Yeah.
They can do that at scale. Like, it's a I don't want to say controversial. That's not the right term. It's more of a
Yeah.
well-known issue.
Yeah. It's a
You're not
need.
having to explain to donors,
Right.
did you know this is an issue? And
Right.
did you know there's a solution? And
Yeah.
right. So charity water, easy example.
Yeah.
Clean water. Like,
Anything
it's a
around human aid
it's
is easy.
very visible. And I would say, again, to their credit, because not only did they pioneer in this space, and I talked to their VP of growth,
Yeah.
Brady Josephson. He's in the book.
Yeah.
The opening chapters, I
Friend of
won't
the podcast.
ruin. There's some story
Yeah. Yeah.
that is really powerful there,
Yeah.
but they don't get enough credit, candidly, because if you would have said to me 10 years ago, Dave, you should build a recurring giving program around clean water or relief and development, I would have said that's an awesome single gift offer. Like, that's a great
It
sort
is.
of impulse buy,
Yeah.
offer. But to get somebody to give on an ongoing basis, that's like saying in disaster response fundraising that you could acquire a recurring donor, which historically is like just a non-starter, because it's
No,
like, no, I
it's
just
all
wanted to
one.
give to the tsunami or the
Yeah.
earthquake,
Absolutely. Yeah.
response. But again, the subscription economy has rewired people to be more willing to give. So I go through the criteria of acquisition oriented organizations. But then on the conversion side, it often is there's maybe a little more education that's
Yeah.
needed. Your offer is maybe strong, but it's not like to a stranger going to immediately make sense and
Right.
pull their heartstrings, right? These are some of the signs. Or you have an existing pretty good acquisition program of single gift
Yeah.
donors, or you
Yeah.
already have a significant donor file. Those are signs that you should be focused on and thinking about how do we convert these donors
Yeah.
more than acquisition.
That's awesome. So conversion, let's assume you've got something rolling. Conversion point happens, right? Hey, we've converted them to a recurring donor,
Yeah.
or hey, we're launching a program. We've already got 500 recurring donors, 1,000, whatever it is, that are just technically they check the box, but we've not done anything for them. One of the questions that I get a lot, and would love your perspective on it, because now I'm just being selfish and asking questions for me, is, hey, over here we're trying to build a sustainer program, this recurring donor program, but we've got our communications team, and they're already sending these people a weekly newsletter, or they're already sending them constant communication. How do we not bombard people with communications from us,
Yeah.
and actually make them want to hear from us now that they're a monthly supporter? Because the last thing we want to do is overwhelm them with too much from us that they say, oh, these guys are just annoying, and they cut off their subscription. Can you speak to that a little? Because that is one of the most common questions I get when we're
Yeah.
building recurring donor programs.
And this is, again, a place where we can learn from the world of subscriptions, because in the world of subscriptions, your business lives or dies on keeping people subscribed to the subscription. The cost to acquire a subscriber is higher. Often there's a lot of, in the subscription world, a lot of effort and dollars that are spent on creating said subscription. And so the only way you make money is if you keep them, right? If you sign up for month one and cancel in month two,
Right.
then you churn. The churn
Yeah.
is another
Totally.
term that we need to
Yeah.
use in
Yeah.
the nonprofit space.
Totally.
And so, in fact, I did the math. On average, 97% of the value of a recurring donor occurs after the first recurring gift.
It's huge.
97. So if you knew that you worked your butt off to acquire, quote unquote, or convert that
Yeah.
recurring donor, if you knew that 90%, 97% of the value of that recurring donor kind of rode on your ongoing treatment of that donor, you might
Don't screw it
spend
up.
a little more time thinking about that.
Yeah.
So a couple thoughts on that. Number one, there's two mistakes nonprofits make. Number one is they don't change the experience at all to the recurring donor, and so it's like if we sent 14 appeals before, you're getting 14 appeals now.
Totally.
Maybe they put their yeah, thank you for being a monthly donor on there, but they're still basically, to your point, of bombardment. So there's the like, we don't change anything, you get everything, which is generally a mistake.
Yeah.
The other end of the spectrum, though, is equally true. I see organizations say that once we get a recurring donor, we want to honor that relationship, and so
Right.
and so we
People
don't
think
send them
ever.
any appeals or newsletters. I'm like, it's like the equivalent of saying, like, your most loyal person said,
Right.
I care deeply about your cause, so much so that I'm going to give you my credit card or my bank information, and you're going to give on an ongoing, or I'm going to give to you on an ongoing basis,
Yeah.
and you stop communicating with me.
What?
Like, what the heck?
Yeah.
So that's important to find the right balance there. You absolutely should be affirming and providing that quote unquote value. So this is what you're gifted this month, telling stories, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But, and this is one other dimension I don't want to miss, and I think is super critical, and that is your recurring donors are your most likely faithful additional givers on your file. The number that I've seen on average is that a typical recurring donor will give 25% on top of whatever they give in any given year. So I have clients with $1 million in recurring revenue and $100,000 in recurring revenue. I have some clients with tens of millions of dollars with recurring revenue. And in almost every case, if they're doing a good job of cultivating and caring for their donors, their recurring donors, if they're $1 million ARR, right, like annual recurring revenue, they're getting another $250,000 of giving from the same donors. And so it's like, yeah, we need to not only care for them, but also give them opportunities to give additional gifts, to give them opportunities to upgrade, increase their giving amount. Now, obviously, we have to have reasons and incentives. And again, I go into that in the book.
I love it. Yeah, that's great. That's something that we are frequently say. Like we always just like to say, like we're end of year, so that's a conversation around our team is like, hey, like
Yep.
make
What do you
sure
do at the
like
end of the
you're
year?
actually asking them for gifts at end of year, like they are bought in to your like illustration. Similarly, like we always talk about a recurring giver as like asking someone to marry you. Which one like rarely do you ask someone to marry you on the first date? So like maybe don't we unless you're a World Vision Compassion, we usually don't recommend asking for a first gift that's a recurring gift. It's kind of like asking someone to marry you on the first date. It's a little bit creepy. It's like, just a little too strong, too fast, man. Not ready to get married yet. For some, it works. Most of
Yeah,
the time,
I wonder. You're making me think. There's got to be another metaphor because I actually, I would say, like I said, maybe it's less than half, but it might still be 30 or 40% of charities actually should totally ask
should on the first one.
for recurring giving on the first date. So
Yeah,
that obviously breaks a little bit down on the
yeah,
marriage metaphor.
yeah.
And this is another one that wouldn't
Yeah.
Here's another one that
Yeah.
really would not be great as a dating strategy. And that is how long should it
Yeah.
be between a donor's first gift and their first invitation to
Totally.
recurring giving?
That's it.
Many organizations ask me that question, and often it's like, well, is it like we go through the welcome series and then like at 60 days we ask them, or is it like
Right.
90 days? Do we wait a year
Yeah.
until they have like a pattern? The answer, Matt, almost
ASAP.
always is right now. Like the first 30 days
Immediately.
is
Yeah.
the most likely time for a
That's awesome.
brand new, they give you their first gift. Within 30 days, you need to ask them to marry you, to use your metaphor. And that's the part where I'm like,
Maybe it breaks down.
I
Yeah. Hey,
wouldn't do that in
maybe,
marriage, but it's an
maybe it's like an
interesting thing
arranged
because it's like,
marriage. I don't know. I don't know.
yeah, I know. It's like, well, we all know those people that like we met and then 2 weeks later we got engaged.
Maybe that's what a good.
It's one of those. That's the kind
Yeah.
of,
That's the kind of marriage that we're looking
as
for.
long as it lasts,
As long as that story is being told, the 50-year wedding anniversary, we're all good,
Mm-hmm.
right? To dream of having that kind of sustainability with our recurring donors. Okay, so that's super helpful, man. Kind of diving into the weeds a little bit more of what these programs can look like. What last thoughts do you have? Like, if you could leave the audience, like, hey, here's something that I really want you to take away from, or maybe even like call to action, besides like go buy the book, which I'll say it for you. Everyone, go buy the book. We'll talk about pre-sales and all that kind of stuff. But what would be the last thing that you'd want people to kind of walk away with thinking about sustainable giving, subscription economy, and recurring donor programs?
I've, as a part of writing the book, I completely created a new talk that uh, I'm giving on the rise of sustainable giving, the future of sustainable giving, and the subscription economy. And Matt, I gave that the other day to a group of faith-based nonprofit leaders, and so it was like the first time, it was like the beta, like, gee, I hope this goes well, and I felt really good about it. But I was talking to one of the attendees afterwards. Her name was Sarah, and I said, what was helpful, what was confusing, just trying to get feedback on how to make this better for other leaders. And she said, and it's just still stuck with me. And she said, Dave, I just came away from your talk thinking we can do this too. Like, and I was like, oh, like that's the point, right? Is to help nonprofit leaders. My estimate is 75% of nonprofits have historically been left out of recurring giving because they're not sponsorship, they're not membership, right? They're the water charity, relief and development, they're the rescue mission, the food bank, they're the whatever, right? They're the not classically type of nonprofit that has raised a lot of recurring giving. And Sarah was just like, I can do this. Like, I can do this. And so I was like, yes, that's what I want you to hear if you're
Yeah,
listening to this
that's what
podcast.
the
Like, you
takeaway.
can do this. It's not easy, but nor was building your major gifts program, and nor was building your general fundraising program. Like, but those, hopefully, for depending on your organization, are a huge part of moving your mission forward. So you can do this too.
Awesome. You can do this too. What a great word of empowerment and encouragement. Okay, Dave, where can people go get the book? It's coming out in a few weeks.
Gee,
So
I wonder.
where can they go get it? The Rise of Sustainable Giving.
Easy URL, sustainablegiving.org.
Awesome.
You can pre-order the book. You can buy it directly, or Amazon's a great place. I'm a big fan, so you're welcome to do that. I also, just FYI for those of you who are listening, I do have some additional, just essentially freebies related to that. So a blueprint on sustainer giving growth. So it takes 7 of the steps from the book and compresses it down into just an easy, like, high level read. And then obviously you can go deeper with the book. But just for folks that are interested in that, they can snag it.
Very cool. Dave Raley, the one and only. Thanks for being here. Super proud of you and all the work you've done. And I always learn a ton from you. And so I'm just grateful for your time, for teaching me something, teaching people in the audience something. Good seeing you, man.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks, buddy.